I sat at that table watching my brother Craig slice into his $400 ribeye with truffle butter, while Dad attacked his $300 filet mignon. Diane, my stepmother, delicately picked at her $250 lobster tail. The waiter had just finished serving them when Dad slid the complimentary breadbasket across the white tablecloth toward me. His eyes were cold empty. "We didn't order for you," he said flatly. Diane's lips curled into that familiar sneer. "Be grateful you're even invited," she added, her voice dripping with contempt. I stayed silent, watching them eat, watching them enjoy themselves. When the waiter finally brought the check, I stood up calmly and looked him straight in the eye. "Send the bill to the ones who ate." The cold air hit my face as I walked out of that steakhouse into the Friday night. My hands were shaking, but not from the temperature. 20 years. 20 years I'd given to that family, to that business, and this was how it ended. With breadcrumbs and contempt. I drove home to my apartment in silence, the city lights blurring past my windshield. My place was small, just a one-bedroom on the east side, but it was mine. I'd always lived frugally, saved my money, figured I was building something. Figured wrong, apparently. My mother died when I was 8. Cancer took her slowly, painfully. I still remember her smell, lavender and vanilla. The way she'd brush my hair back from my forehead when I had nightmares. 2 years after we buried her, Dad brought Diane into our lives. She arrived with 6-year-old Craig in tow, and suddenly I wasn't the only son anymore. I tried. God knows I tried. I worked in the family construction business from the time I was 15 years old. Started as a grunt laborer hauling materials, cleaning job sites, doing whatever needed doing. Dad owned Morrison & Son Construction, a small operation back then, maybe pulling in $300,000 a year on good years. I learned every aspect of the trade. By 22, I was running crews. By 26, I was managing entire projects. My connections, my ideas, my blood and sweat helped build that company into something real. $3 million in annual revenue. We had 42 employees, contracts all over the state. Morrison & Son had a reputation for quality work, fair prices, and honest dealing. I'd built those relationships myself, job site by job site, handshake by handshake. Craig never touched the business. He went to art school upstate, spent 4 years painting abstract pieces. Nobody understood, and fewer people wanted to buy. After graduation, he drifted. Now he worked part-time at some gallery downtown selling other people's art for commission. He showed up for family dinners, smiled his pretty smile, and collected praise for existing. It was 11 at night when my phone rang. Dad's name lit up the screen. "How dare you?" His voice came through sharp, furious. "How dare you embarrass us like that?" The waiter had to chase us down in the parking lot for payment. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I sat on my couch, still wearing my jacket. "You humiliated me, Dad. You handed me bread while Craig ate a steak that cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. You invited me to dinner just to show me how little I matter. You think you're so smart." His voice went from hot anger to ice cold in seconds. That tone always preceded something bad. "You think you can disrespect me and walk away. You're done, bud. Done. I'm removing you from the business." My stomach dropped. "What?" "You heard me. I've been planning this for months. Diane's been right about you all along. You're difficult, ungrateful, just like your mother was." The mention of my mother felt like a physical blow. "Don't you dare bring her into this." "I have a meeting with my lawyer Monday morning." Dad continued ignoring me. "I'm rewriting my will. Everything goes to Craig. The business, the house, the investments, all of it. You get nothing. Not one dime. Craig is my real son. You've been a burden since your mother died." The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. 20 years. Every weekend spent on job sites. Every holiday cutting short because we had a deadline. Every girlfriend who left because I was married to the work. Every dream I deferred because family came first. All of it for nothing. My entire career was Morrison & Son Construction. My reputation in the industry was tied to that company name. What was I supposed to do? Start over at 33 with nothing? Who would hire me when Dad would trash my name to anyone who asked? But I'm not impulsive. My mother taught me that. She used to say, "Think first, act. Second, regret never." So I sat in that dark apartment, and I thought. I thought about Diane's smug face, about Craig's empty existence being rewarded with everything I'd built, about Dad's cold voice calling me a burden, and I started planning. Monday morning came gray and cold. I got to the construction company office at 7 like always. My key didn't work in the lock. I tried it 3 times, thinking maybe the lock was frozen or I was using the wrong key. Then Tommy emerged from the security office. Tommy had worked security for Morrison and Son for 8 years. We'd drunk beers together after long days, talked about his kids, his wife's medical bills. "Bud, he wouldn't meet my eyes. I got orders not to let you in. Your father said you're terminated effective immediately." "Tommy, come on. My tools are in there. My truck, my equipment. That's $30,000 worth of gear." He handed me an envelope, his hand shaking slightly. "I'm sorry, man. I really am." Inside was a termination letter on company letterhead, effective immediately, no severance, and at the bottom an accusation of financial irregularities pending investigation. I drove straight to Gerald Patterson's office. Gerald was my college roommate's father, a sharp employment lawyer who'd handled some contract disputes for me over the years. He read the termination letter twice, his expression darkening. "They're covering their bases," he said finally. "Let me pull up the company records." He worked his computer for several minutes, clicking through databases, his frown deepening. Finally, he turned the monitor toward me. "Bud, according to the state business registry, you were removed as part owner 3 months ago." "That's impossible. I never signed anything." He pulled up documents, transfer of ownership forms, corporate restructuring papers, and there at the bottom of each page was my signature. Except I'd never seen these documents before in my life. "This is forgery," I said. Probably Gerald agreed. "But proving it will be difficult and expensive. We're looking at depositions, handwriting experts, court fees. Minimum $75,000 to fight this properly." I had $42,000 in savings, every penny I'd managed to put away over 20 years. "There's more," Gerald said quietly. He pulled up the company's financial records. I still had access to the online accounts for another few hours at least. "Look at this." Over the past 2 years, $400,000 had vanished from the company accounts. Money funneled through a shell company called Westside Property Development, LLC. The transfer authorizations all bore my forged signature. Gerald dug deeper. Westside Property Development was registered to Diane. "They're not just firing you," Gerald said. "They're framing you for embezzlement. If your father files a police report, you'll face criminal charges." My phone rang. My landlord, Mrs. Chen. Wait, I need to avoid that name. My landlord, Mrs. Sullivan. "Bud, I received a very disturbing phone call this morning," she said without preamble. "From a concerned family member who told me you're involved in criminal activity. I know Diane from church, and she would never lie about something like that. I'm giving you 30 days notice. I want you out." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in Gerald's office watching my entire life collapse. No job. Framed for embezzlement. Facing eviction. Potentially facing prison. "I need 24 hours, I told Gerald. "I still have access to the accounts for a few more hours. There has to be something we can use." That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my laptop downloading every document, every email, every financial record I could access before they locked me out. And buried in the company's server, I found something beautiful. Diane had been embezzling for 5 years, not 2. The total wasn't $400,000. It was $900,000. And she'd been sloppy. I found emails between her and Craig discussing getting rid of me. Email after email going back 6 months. Diane to Craig. "Once we frame him for the theft, your father will have no choice but to cut him out. You'll get everything." Craig's response. "What about prison? That might be too far." Diane's reply. "Don't be weak. He's not really your brother anyway." I found her personal laptop backup on the company server. She'd used our IT guy to back up her personal files, probably thinking nobody would look. The backup contained original documents showing her real signature on the embezzlement paperwork. It contained a document where she'd practiced forging my signature, comparing her attempts to my real one. I had everything, every piece of evidence I needed to prove my innocence and bury them both. At 6 in the morning, I drove back to Gerald's office. He was already there, bless him, because I'd called ahead. I showed him everything on a flash drive. "This is it," he said, actually smiling. "We can prove forgery, embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. We can destroy them, bud. We file a police report today, get a restraining order, file civil suit, freeze the company assets." For the first time in days, I felt hope. I got in my truck and headed toward the police station. It was just after 7 in the morning. Highway 41 was light on traffic, sun rising over the hills to the east. Then I saw the black Mercedes SUV in my rearview mirror. Craig's car. It accelerated suddenly, closing the distance between us. I pressed the gas, but the Mercedes was faster. It rammed me from behind hard enough to snap my head forward. I struggled to control the truck as it swerved. The Mercedes pulled back, then accelerated again, rammed me harder. "What are you doing?" I shouted at empty air. The third impact sent my truck spinning. I fought the wheel, but physics won. The truck left the road, flipped, and rolled down the embankment. The world turned into noise and chaos, metal, screaming glass shattering, then darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. Everything hurt. A nurse told me I'd been unconscious for 6 hours. Broken ribs, concussion lacerations across my face and arms, fractured left forearm. The flash drive had been in my pocket. It was shattered, destroyed. My laptop had been in the truck. The truck was totaled, crushed laptop broken into pieces. All the evidence, gone. A police officer stood by my bed. "Looks like you fell asleep at the wheel," he said, making notes. "Single vehicle accident. You're lucky to be alive." "It wasn't an accident," I said, my voice hoarse. "A black Mercedes ran me off the road. Craig Morrison. My brother. He tried to kill me." The officer looked skeptical. "No other vehicles were reported at the scene. No witnesses." "You probably dreamed it, son. Head trauma can do that." My phone was destroyed. I couldn't even call Gerald. The hospital bill arrived the next day. $68,000. My insurance had been through the company. I'd just been terminated. No coverage. I spent 4 days in that hospital. Dad never visited. Nobody from the company called. On day 3, Diane visited. She waited until the nurse left the room, then stood by my bed with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Terrible accident," she said softly. "You should be more careful, bud. Especially since your father is considering filing a police report about that missing money. $900,000 is a lot to steal. That's serious prison time. Federal crime, wire fraud, all sorts of nasty charges." She leaned closer. "But accidents happen. People get hurt. Sometimes they get hurt worse. You should think about that." She left without another word. My friend Jake picked me up when they discharged me. Jake had worked on my construction crews for 6 years, a solid guy, loyal. He'd called the hospital every day. When I told him I had nowhere to go, he offered his couch without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need, man," he said, helping me into his apartment. "This is messed up. Your own family doing this to you." The next morning, police knocked on Jake's door. I was arrested for embezzling $900,000 from Morrison and Son Construction. They handcuffed me right there in Jake's living room while he stood helpless watching them put me in the back of a cruiser. The arraignment was a nightmare. Public defender overworked and underprepared. Barely glanced at my file before we went before the judge. The prosecutor laid out the case. Forged documents with my signature. Transfer authorizations. Shell company connections. $900,000 missing. Bail was set at $250,000. I had no money, no assets, no one to call who could post that kind of bond. Dad could have bailed me out with a phone call. He refused. I sat in county jail for 3 weeks awaiting the preliminary hearing. My cellmate was a guy named Dennis, an accountant arrested for tax fraud. He was fighting his case, knew financial crimes inside and out. When I told him my situation, he listened carefully. "You need the original server backups," he said. Even deleted files can be recovered if you can physically access the company server. I know a forensic accountant woman named Patricia Sullivan. She owes me a favor. If you can get her access to that server, she can recover the real files. But I was in jail. I couldn't do anything. The preliminary hearing destroyed me. My public defender showed up unprepared, no real defense strategy. The prosecutor presented their evidence methodically. Dad took the stand. He testified that I'd had full access to all company accounts, that I'd been behaving erratically, that I'd made threats about the business. Then Dad looked at the judge and said, "My son has always blamed his stepmother for his mother's death. He resented my remarriage. He resented Craig. He's been angry for 20 years, and now he's trying to destroy what I built." Every word was a lie delivered with perfect conviction. He looked like a grieving father betrayed by an ungrateful son. The judge found probable cause. Ordered me held for trial. Trial date set for 4 months out. Bail remained at $250,000. I went back to county jail. Jake visited whenever they'd let him. On his third visit, he brought news that made everything worse. "The company's doing great," he said, and his voice was full of rage on my behalf. "Craig's the new acting president. Can you believe that guy doesn't know a 2x4 from a 4x4 and he's running things? Diane's the chief financial officer now. What about Dad? He's stepping back, letting them run it. He tells everyone he has one son now that the other one is dead to him." The words hurt worse than the broken ribs had. "There's something else," Jake said. He looked uncomfortable. "I didn't want to tell you, but you need to know. I saw Craig and Diane together last week, at that hotel bar over on Westbrook Avenue. They were all over each other, bud. Kissing. Hands everywhere. They went upstairs together. To a room." The world tilted sideways. Craig and Diane. I followed them. I know it sounds crazy, but something felt wrong. They're sleeping together. Have been for a while based on how comfortable they were. Your dad has no idea. Hez? Everything clicked into place. Diane didn't just want the inheritance for Craig. She wanted Craig. The whole thing was bigger than I'd thought. Frame me, push me out, let Craig inherit everything, then either divorce Dad or wait for him to die. Dad was their victim too. I felt a strange mix of rage and pity for the man who'd betrayed me. I spent my nights in that cell planning. Dennis taught me about data recovery, about forensic accounting, about building legal cases. I used my one phone call per day to contact Patricia Sullivan through Dennis's connection. She agreed to help if I could get her physical access to the server. But I was in jail with no money, no way out, no prospects. Craig and Diane were living their best lives while I rotted in a cell facing 20 years in federal prison for crimes they'd committed. I'd gone from having a career and a future to losing absolutely everything. And it was about to get even worse. The man who walked into the county jail visiting room 3 weeks into my stay was not someone I expected to see. Harold Brennan was in his 60s, lean, and weathered with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You don't know me," he said, sitting across from me. "But I know your father. I was his first business partner 30 years ago." I vaguely remembered the name from old company stories. "What happened?" "Your father bought me out when the business was struggling. Used a technicality in our partnership contract to force me out for a fraction of what my share was worth. I lost everything. Took me 10 years to rebuild." "Then why are you here?" "Because I read about your arrest in the paper, and I know your father. This has his stink all over it. And that woman he married." Harold shook his head. "I've been watching her destroy your father for years. She's poison. Watching. I keep tabs on the people who wrong me. Call it a character flaw." He leaned forward. "Here's my offer. You help me finally get revenge on your father. I help you clear your name. Point. 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 I keep tabs on the... I've done well for myself over the years. I have resources. I don't want revenge," I said. "I want my life back." Sometimes they're the same thing. 3 days later, Harold posted my bail, $250,000. I walked out of county jail after 23 days blinking in the sunlight like I'd been underground for years. Harold took me to a cheap motel on the edge of town, bought me clothes, food, paid for the room. "We need to move fast," he said. "You violated no bail conditions yet, but time's not on our side." Patricia Sullivan arrived that evening. She was in her 40s, sharp as a blade with 20 years of forensic accounting experience. She laid out the plan. We break into the office, access the server, recover the deleted evidence. I can do it in under 20 minutes if everything goes smoothly. "That's illegal," I said. "If we get caught, I go back to jail. My case is over." "If we don't do it, your case is over anyway," Harold said. "They framed you perfectly. You need evidence they can't refute." He had a contact at the security company that monitored Morrison and Son. The contact agreed to disable the alarm system for 10 minutes on Saturday night. 10 minutes. That's all we'd have. Saturday came. 2 in the morning, we drove to the office in Harold's truck, lights off, parking 2 blocks away. The contact disabled the alarm remotely. Harold kept watch outside, while Patricia and I entered through the back door. The office felt surreal in the darkness. I'd worked here for 20 years. Now I was breaking in like a criminal. Patricia went straight to the server room, connecting her equipment, running recovery software. Minutes ticked by. 8 minutes. 10 minutes. 12. "It's taking longer than expected," she whispered. "The data's fragmented. Need more time." 14 minutes. I heard a sound outside. Couldn't tell if it was Harold or something else. 17 minutes. "Almost there," Patricia said. Files were appearing on her external hard drive. Emails, documents, evidence. Then I heard sirens. "We're out of time," I said. 2 more minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes." She grabbed the external hard drive, disconnecting it mid-transfer. We ran for the back door. Behind us, I heard the front door opening. Security company arriving. We made it out seconds before they would have seen us sprinting through the darkness to Harold's truck. Back at the motel, we reviewed what we'd recovered. Patricia's face fell as she examined the files. We got about 60% of what we needed. Enough to show fraud occurred, but not enough to definitively prove Diane did it. Some key emails are corrupted. The court might not accept this. Defense lawyers will claim the files were tampered with during an illegal entry. My heart sank. I'd risked everything for incomplete evidence. Morning came with worse news. Morrison and Son filed a police report claiming a break-in attempted evidence destruction. The police issued a warrant for my arrest for burglary and violating bail conditions. Harold drove me to a cabin he owned 2 hours north, deep in the mountains. "Stay here. Don't contact anyone. I'll figure out our next move." I was a fugitive now. 1 week later, the news broke that made me a monster. Marcus Torres, a construction worker who'd been with Morrison and Son for 15 years, was found dead at a company job site. Marcus had been loyal to me, had been asking questions about the financial irregularities, had told Jake he planned to testify on my behalf if the case went to trial. The police ruled his death suspicious. He'd fallen from scaffolding, but the circumstances didn't add up. Then, an anonymous tip came in. Text messages on Marcus's phone appearing to be from my old number threatening him for snitching. The police opened a homicide investigation. I was wanted for questioning in Marcus's murder. News stations ran the story with my photo. Fugitive embezzler, now murder suspect. They made me sound like a monster. I sat in Harold's cabin watching my life explode on television. Patricia and Harold both urged me to run. Leave the state. Maybe leave the country. "Running makes me look guilty," I said. "I'm innocent. I won't let them win." "They've already won," Patricia said gently. "They've thought of everything. Every move you make, they're 10 steps ahead." She was right. I'd tried fighting back and ended up worse off each time. Diane had orchestrated this perfectly. Frame me for embezzlement, attempted burglary, now murder. Craig had run me off the road. They'd killed Marcus or caused his death somehow. They were eliminating anyone who could help me, destroying any path to redemption. I had no evidence. No allies, except Harold and Patricia. No way to prove my innocence. The walls were closing in from every direction, and I couldn't see any way out. I was trapped in a nightmare with no visible exit, and the people who'd put me there were living their perfect lives on the foundation of my destroyed one. Everything changed when Dad's heart gave out. Not completely. He survived. But the heart attack was serious enough to land him in intensive care, and sometimes brushes with death make people reconsider their choices. Harold got the news through his network of contacts. Your father collapsed at the office yesterday. He's at Memorial Hospital. Stable but serious condition. I felt nothing at first, then guilt for feeling nothing. Then anger at feeling guilty. My emotions about Dad had become a tangled mess. But something else was happening that I didn't know about. Something that would change everything. Jake had never stopped believing in me. After I disappeared, after the arrest warrant, after the murder accusation, Jake kept working at Morrison, and Son kept his head down, kept his ears open. And he'd recruited others. Danny, Luis, Frank, and Russell. 4 guys who'd worked under me for years who knew I wasn't capable of what they were saying. They'd been quietly investigating on their own, gathering evidence piece by piece. They collected testimony from vendors about Diane's shady dealings. Found invoices showing inflated costs and kickback schemes. Tracked down a witness who'd seen Craig's black Mercedes speeding away from the scene of my accident on Highway 41. Built a case brick by brick while I hid in a cabin, thinking I was alone. Jake called Harold's burner phone. I need to meet with you and Bud. I've got something. We met at a rest stop halfway between the cabin and the city. Jake handed me a tablet computer, and on it was 18 minutes of audio that would save my life. I recorded this 3 nights ago, Jake said. Been staying late at the office cleaning up, keeping quiet. Heard them arguing after everyone left. I pressed play. Craig's voice came through clearly. We killed a man. Marcus was going to talk to the police. But did we have to actually do it? Diane's voice sharp and angry. Shut up. It was an accident. He fell. We just didn't help him. We let nature take its course. You loosened the scaffolding. You knew he would fall. And now Bud takes the blame. Perfect. Your father's in the hospital, probably won't make it. Once he's gone, we execute the will, you inherit everything, we can finally be together openly. What if Bud somehow proves he's innocent? He can't. We've been careful. And if he gets too close, we'll make sure he has an accident too. Accidents happen all the time in our business. There was more. 18 minutes of them discussing the entire scheme, the embezzlement, the frame, their affair, their plans for the future. Jake had captured it all. This is it, Harold said, actually laughing with relief. This is everything we need. Patricia had made a breakthrough too. Using advanced recovery techniques on the partial data we'd gotten, she'd traced the shell company to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. $700,000 sitting there in an account, opened with Diane's passport, her signature, her fingerprints on the documents. We have the paper trail now, Patricia said. Money, stolen money, hidden Diane's direct involvement. Between this and Jake's recording, we have enough for the FBI. We spent 2 days coordinating with federal agents. Wire fraud, money crossing state lines made it a federal case. The FBI had been building white-collar crime cases and jumped at the chance to nail someone with this much evidence. But I needed one more thing before this ended. I needed Dad to know the truth. Against everyone's advice, I decided to go to Dad in the hospital. Harold thought I was crazy. Patricia said it was too risky. But I needed my father to understand what he'd done, what had been done to him before this whole thing exploded. I waited until late evening, visiting hours technically over. Slipped into Memorial Hospital through a side entrance up the stairs to the cardiac unit. Found Dad's room. He was awake, sitting up slightly, looking old and tired. When he saw me, his hand moved toward the call button. Please, I said. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Something in my voice made him hesitate. His hand hovered over the button, but didn't press it. I pulled out my phone and played Jake's recording. Dad's face went white as he listened to Diane and Craig. The affair. The murder. The schemes. The plans to let him die and take everything. When it finished, he was crying. What have I done? He whispered. What have I done to you? You chose her over me, I said. For 20 years, every decision, every moment, you chose her word over mine. She poisoned me against you. Slowly. Every day, little comments, little doubts. Made me think you were the problem. Made me forget who you really were. He wiped his eyes. Your mother would be ashamed of me. Mom would have seen through Diane in 5 seconds. I know. He looked at me. How do we fix this? You help me end it. Tomorrow. One final board meeting. He agreed. The next evening, an emergency board meeting was called at Morrison & Son Construction. 3 longtime board members showed up, along with the company lawyer, expecting to discuss Dad's health and transition of power. Diane arrived looking polished and confident. Craig came in behind her nervous. They thought this was their coronation. Then the door opened. Dad walked in against doctor's orders, determined. Behind him came me, Harold, Patricia, Jake, and 2 FBI agents. Diane's confident expression crumbled. This meeting is about fraud, embezzlement, and murder, Dad said. His voice was steady, strong. Diane, Craig, you're done. Patricia presented the financial evidence on the screen, the offshore accounts, the paper trail, the shell companies, $900,000 stolen over 5 years. Jake played the audio recording, Craig's voice admitting to loosening scaffolding. Diane confirming Marcus's murder. Their plans to let Dad die. The FBI agent read them their rights and presented arrest warrants. Craig broke, immediately collapsing into tears, trying to blame everything on Diane. She made me do it. All of it. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Diane stayed defiant at first. You can't prove any of this. The FBI agent held up a paper. We have your offshore account statements. You made a transaction this morning. We've been watching you for 3 days, Miss Morrison. Everything's documented. That's when Diane finally broke. She turned on Dad, screaming, I gave you the best years of my life. You were supposed to die and leave us everything. That was the plan. I loved you, Dad said quietly. I destroyed my relationship with my son for you. FBI agents handcuffed them both. Craig was sobbing. Diane was silent now, already calculating her legal defense. They were walked out in handcuffs while board members sat in stunned silence. The FBI cleared me of all charges within 48 hours. District Attorney issued a public apology. My name was restored. But the damage was done. Months of hell. Trauma. Betrayal. Prison time. Being hunted like a criminal. Dad tried to apologize that night. Tried to make it right. I was wrong, he said. Terribly. Unforgivably wrong. I chose her over you. I testified against you. I called you dead to me. I can never take that back. No, I said. You can't. Can you forgive me? I don't know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I walked away, leaving him alone with the consequences of his choices. 3 months later, the legal dust had settled. Diane was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Craig got 15 years for conspiracy and manslaughter in Marcus Torres's death. The prosecution had offered Craig a deal in exchange for his testimony against Diane, but even with cooperation, the judge wasn't lenient. Civil suits followed. I sued for damages, defamation, pain, and suffering, wrongful termination. The settlement came to $4 million, taken from company assets, and Diane's recovered offshore funds. Patricia made sure every penny of the stolen money was traced and recovered. Morrison & Son Construction sat in limbo. Dad was too sick and too broken to run it. His second heart attack, minor this time, came a month after the trial. The company had 42 employees who needed paychecks, clients who needed projects completed, contracts that required fulfillment. Harold came to me with a proposal. Take over the company. It's what should have been yours from the beginning. I'd spent 3 months in therapy by then. Court mandated at first, then voluntary because I realized I needed it. Dr. Rachel Foster helped me unpack 20 years of grief and abandonment. Helped me understand that I'd been carrying my mother's death like a weight on my chest, that Dad's remarriage had felt like a betrayal, even before Diane proved herself to be poison. Forgiveness isn't about them, Dr. Foster told me. It's about you. About not letting their poison corrupt your soul. I thought about that a lot in those months. Thought about who I wanted to be. My mother raised me to be better than this. Better than revenge. Better than hate. Dad came to me one afternoon, showing up at the apartment I'd rented after getting my settlement money. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. The doctors said his heart was weak. Stress and age and guilt were eating him alive. "I want to give you the company," he said. "Full ownership. Change the name if you want. Do whatever you want with it. It's the least I can do." "Why now?" "Because it was always supposed to be yours. Because I failed, you failed your mother's memory. I can't undo it, but I can try to make some of it right." I thought about it for a week, talked it through with Dr. Foster, with Harold, with Jake. Finally, I made my decision. I would take the company, but on my terms. We renamed it Morrison Legacy Construction. The legacy was for my mother, whose memory deserved to be honored. I brought Harold on as a partner and senior advisor. Jake became operations manager, overseeing all projects. Danny, Luis, Frank, and Russell, the guys who'd stood by me, got raises and profit-sharing agreements. We rebuilt the company culture from the ground up. Integrity, loyalty, respect, fair dealing, the things I'd always believed in. Dad remained as a silent partner, no management role. He got a small salary, enough to cover his medical bills and modest living expenses. Everything else went back into the company and the employees. And slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding something else. A relationship. Not father and son. We couldn't get back to that. Too much had been broken. But we started having dinner once a week. Dad's choice of restaurant, Dad paid. We'd sit across from each other and talk. Small talk at first, then deeper things. He told me stories about my mother I'd never heard. Their first date. The day I was born. How she'd wanted to name me Bud, because her grandfather was named Bud, and he'd been the best man she ever knew. I buried myself in work after she died. Dad admitted one night. Avoided the grief. Avoided everything that reminded me of her. Including you. You looked so much like her. Every time I saw you, I saw her. It hurt too much. So you replaced us. Diane filled a void. I was weak and lonely, and she knew exactly what to say. I'm not making excuses. I made my choices. But I want you to understand how it happened. Understanding isn't forgiving, I said. I know. We kept meeting, every week. Sometimes the conversation flowed. Sometimes we sat in silence. But we kept showing up. I wasn't ready to call him Dad again. Maybe I never would be. But I could call him Robert. I could sit across from him and see him as a flawed human being who'd made terrible choices, who'd hurt me deeply, but who was trying in his limited way to make amends. The company thrived. Within 6 months, we'd regained our reputation. Clients who'd left during the scandal came back. New contracts rolled in. We were featured in a construction industry magazine. Integrity in Construction: How Bud Morrison Rebuilt Trust. I started dating again. Met a woman named Emma at a coffee shop. She was a teacher, patient and kind, with a laugh that reminded me life could still be good. We took it slow. She knew about my past, knew about the betrayal and the trial. She saw my scars and didn't run away. I bought a house. Nothing fancy, a small 3-bedroom place with a yard. Stayed grounded. Remembered where I came from. And I started volunteering at a youth construction training program, teaching at-risk kids how to frame walls, read blueprints, use tools safely. Giving back. Creating something good from the bad. One Friday evening, about 8 months after I took over the company, I asked Robert to dinner. I chose the place this time. The same upscale steakhouse where this whole thing had started. We sat at a different table, but the memory hung between us. The same waiter was working that night. He recognized us both, his eyes widening slightly. I ordered 2 premium steaks, expensive wine, appetizers, desserts. We ate and talked. Robert told me about his latest checkup, his cardiac rehabilitation. I told him about a new project we'd landed, a community center renovation. When the waiter brought the check, Robert reached for it reflexively. I put my hand on his. "I've got this one," I said. Robert's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, son." The word hung in the air. Son. He'd called me that. I didn't correct him, just nodded. "You're welcome." It wasn't forgiveness, not complete, not yet. But it was a beginning, and sometimes that's enough. People ask me all the time if it was worth it. The pain, the betrayal, the 23 days in jail, the months as a fugitive, losing everything. They ask if I wouldn't rather have just walked away that night in the restaurant, cut ties, moved on quietly. Here's what I learned through all of it. Family isn't just blood. It's not about who shares your DNA or your last name. Real family is the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. Jake and my construction crew, they're my brothers. They risked their jobs to gather evidence. They never stopped believing in me. Harold, a man my father had wronged 30 years ago, showed me more loyalty than my own father did. That's family. But I also learned that hurt people hurt people. My father was drowning in grief he'd never processed. When my mother died, he shoved all that pain down deep and tried to pretend it wasn't there. Diane saw that weakness and exploited it with surgical precision. Craig was raised by a manipulative woman and learned to be manipulative himself. None of that excuses what they did to me. Nothing excuses betrayal. Nothing excuses trying to frame an innocent man for crimes you committed. Nothing excuses murder. But understanding it helps me carry less hate. Forgiveness is complicated. It's not a switch you flip. It's not one decision you make and then it's done. It's choosing every single day not to let their poison corrupt your soul. I forgive my father not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to not be eaten alive by resentment. Some days that forgiveness comes easy. Other days I remember him testifying against me in court, calling me dead to him, and the anger comes roaring back. That's okay. Healing isn't linear. If you're going through something similar right now, if you're facing betrayal from people who should love, you hear this. You are not defined by how they treat you. You are not less valuable because they couldn't see your worth. Their blindness is their failure, not yours. Fight for your truth. Stand up for yourself. Document everything. Find your people, the ones who truly see you. But don't become them in the process. Don't let their cruelty make you cruel. Don't let their dishonesty make you dishonest. The best revenge isn't destroying them. The best revenge is building a life so good, so full of real love and real integrity, that their absence from it becomes the punishment. I got my justice in the courtroom. Diane and Craig are in prison. The truth came out. But I got my real victory by becoming the man my mother would be proud of, by leading with integrity. On lawn, the 7 Jx. I-J, J, 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 Day, J, J. By showing up for the people who showed up for me, by building something meaningful from the ashes. That moment in the restaurant when Robert handed me bread while Craig ate his $400 steak, that was the moment I realized I deserved better. Not just better food, better treatment, better family, a better life. And I built it, not by tearing anyone down, but by building myself up. Morrison Legacy Construction now employs 60 people. We've completed over 40 projects this year. We're profitable, growing, and respected. I've got a woman I love, a house I'm proud of, employees who trust me, and a father who's trying to earn back what he threw away. That steak Craig ate cost him 15 years of his life in federal prison. The bread I got, it fed something more important than my stomach. It fed my hunger for justice, for truth, for real connection. I'd make that trade every single time. Looking back now, I see how each moment led to the next. How every time I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. How every solution created a new problem. I went from family dinner to jobless, to framed for embezzlement, to nearly killed, to arrested, to fugitive, to murder suspect. Each level worse than the last. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, there's nowhere to go but up. And the climb up teaches you who you really are. I learned I'm stronger than I thought, more resilient, more capable of standing alone when necessary. I learned the value of true friendship, the kind that risks everything for you. I learned that sometimes the people who owe you nothing give you everything, while the people who owe you everything give you nothing. I learned that my mother's lessons stayed with me even when everything else was stripped away. Think first act, second regret never. She was right. And I learned that success isn't about money or status or winning. Success is living with integrity, even when integrity costs you everything. Success is being able to look yourself in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. Emma asked me once if I'd do anything differently. We were lying in bed, her head on my chest, talking about the past. "I'd have stood up sooner," I said. "I let them treat me badly for so long because I was trying to keep the peace, trying to be the bigger person. But there's a difference between being the bigger person and being a doormat." "When did you figure that out?" "When my dad handed me that bread." She kissed my shoulder. "I'm glad you did." "Me too." The scars are still there. Some nights I wake up from dreams where I'm back in that jail cell. Some days I see a black Mercedes and my heart races. Trauma leaves marks, but those marks don't define me. They're part of my story, not the whole story. Dr. Foster says healing takes time. She says some wounds never fully close, but you learn to live with them. You integrate them into who you are. The trick is not letting them be the only thing you are. So I keep building. Keep growing. Keep showing up. Morrison Legacy Construction is expanding into sustainable building practices. Green construction. We're teaching apprenticeships, bringing new people into the trade, creating opportunities. Robert comes to the office, sometimes not to work, just to visit. He'll sit in the break room drinking coffee, talking to the guys, telling old stories. He's trying. It's not enough to erase 20 years of hurt, but it's something. Last week, he told me he's updating his will again, leaving everything to me. I told him I don't want it. "Keep enough to live comfortably," I said. "Give the rest to charity. The Children's Hospital where they treated Mom. The Cardiac Research Foundation. Places that actually do good in the world." He cried when I said that. "You're twice the man I ever was. I learned from Mom, not you." It was harsh, but true. And sometimes, truth is harsh. Jake got married last month, asked me to be his best man. Standing up there at his wedding, watching him marry the love of his life surrounded by our crew, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging, family, joy. At the reception, Jake gave a speech. "Bud taught me that loyalty isn't just a word. It's a choice you make every day. He went through hell and we went through it with him because that's what family does. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose." The whole room stood and applauded. Not for me, for all of us, for what we'd built together. That's the real victory. Not winning in court, not the settlement money, not even the company's success. The real victory is sitting at a table with people who genuinely care about you, who stood by you when they had nothing to gain and everything to lose, who chose you when you had nothing to offer them. So if you're in that restaurant right now watching someone hand you bread while others feast, know this. You can leave. You can walk away. You can refuse to accept treatment that diminishes you. And when you do, when you finally stand up and say, "Enough," the road ahead will be hard. Harder than you imagine. You'll face things that seem impossible. You'll want to give up. You'll wonder if it's worth it. It is. Every struggle, every setback, every moment you want to quit but don't. It's worth it. Because on the other side of that struggle is a life built on truth instead of lies. Respect instead of contempt. Real love instead of manipulation. And that life tastes better than any $400 steak ever could. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to family or people close to you who were treating you wrong? How did you find the courage to walk away or fight back? Drop your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories, and maybe, just maybe, help someone realize they're not alone in their struggle. And subscribe to the channel. We share stories about real-life challenges, about overcoming betrayal and injustice, about finding strength you didn't know you had. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's being treated less than they deserve. Someone who needs permission to stand up for themselves. Your share might change someone's life. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you know that you deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve real family, whether that's blood or chosen. And you have the strength to build the life you deserve. Take care of yourself. Stand up for yourself. And remember, the bread they hand you doesn't define your worth. You define your worth.